Hello, everyone, and welcome to March 31st, 2020. Our interesting fact of the day is that the Eiffel Tower opened on this day in 1889, and I hear that right now is a great time to go visit the Eiffel Tower. No one's there. But anyway, our objective for today, we're going to write about characterization. Yesterday, we had an assignment on Flipgrid, and that was just to sign on to Flipgrid and say hello and tell us about one thing that's interesting about you. But we're going to use this Flipgrid as we move forward. You know, we've been doing this independent reading assignment, and I'd like to ask you, whenever you finish a book, to give a Flipgrid book review. So this Flipgrid book review, you should talk about what was good about your book, who might enjoy reading it, what was not so good about your book. One thing we want to avoid is a summary of your book. You don't need to tell us everything that happened. Just stick with the good bits that might convince a person to read that book or not read the book. And this is going to be due by April 17th. It's sort of my expectation that in these last 2 weeks and this next week, you'll be finishing a book and you'll be able to do a Flipgrid book review on that. If you have questions about that, please email me, but we'll expect that from you by April 17th. Today, we are going to talk about writing about characterization, and I'm going to ask you to do this. Write 2 paragraphs about how Romeo or Juliet's characterization impacts an interaction with another character. You might recall this was what we asked you to do on Friday, but I'm going to do a little bit more instruction today, and we're going to try this one again. You know, when we are writing about characterization, we have this proficiency scale, and there are several parts to it. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about developing the character. And of course, this is very important. We need to see who a character is. Today, we're talking about the second part, the interaction. Because once we know who a character is, we can see how that character impacts or influences other interactions with other characters. And that's exactly what we want to look for today. So we are going to ask you to write 2 paragraphs. In one paragraph, we want to describe the characterization of a dynamic character. So we want to focus on a character who changes throughout the course of the play. And then the second paragraph we want to write determines how the characterization affects the interaction between 2 characters. Oh, we talked about one character here. We know who they are. So how does who they are make something happen? Now, I want you to be sure to use multiple pieces of evidence to demonstrate character development and impact on others. It's not enough to just know who that person is. We want to see how things develop. And we want to see what do they say and what happens after they say it. But then we also want to explain how the evidence illustrates character development and interaction. So we do want that analysis in there. I wanted to talk real quickly about topic sentences. Now, I have 3 topic sentences here. I'm going to read them for you. Number 1 says, Romeo is a dynamic character. Number 2 says, Romeo is depressed. Number 3, a dynamic character is one that changes over the course of the story. Now, if we're talking about a paragraph about characterization, which one of these do you think is the strongest topic sentence? Now, you know, in class, I would normally ask somebody to say which one they think is the most strong, but I'm going to just tell you. For me, number 2 is the one, because it clearly names a character and it clearly names a character trait. When we look at number 1, Romeo is a dynamic character. Well, sure. Dynamic character isn't really a character trait so much as just something that happens in a story. So we're not so much worried about whether Romeo is dynamic or not. We would hope that when you're talking about characterization, you are talking about a dynamic character. And then this last one here, number 3, a dynamic character is one that changes over the course of a story. Well, yes, in this one, we're just defining what dynamic means. We're not getting to the meat of what we want to talk about. And we want to get to that thing we want to talk about as soon as possible. So mentioning it in the topic sentence, that makes a strong paragraph. So I want to show you a couple of paragraphs that I wrote with this idea of characterization in mind, and how does characterization make things happen. So here, let's look at my first paragraph here. I'll just read this one. In A Midsummer Night's Dream, Hermia is stubborn in her love for Lysander. Aegeus, Hermia's father, wants her to marry Demetrius, but she wants to marry Lysander. Aegeus begs the king of Athens, Theseus to help him convince Hermia to marry Demetrius. Theseus gives her an ultimatum. If she refuses to marry Demetrius, she has the choice either to die the death or to abjure forever the society of men. Instead of accepting her father's choice, Hermia says, "So will I grow, so live, so die, my lord, ere I will yield my virgin patent up unto his lordship, whose unwished yoke my soul consents not to give sovereignty." In other words, she'd rather die than marry Demetrius. Hermia shows her stubbornness by describing marriage as a yoke, as if she were an ox for Lysander to use as he wishes. Oxen must be forced to work, but Hermia will not be forced. By creating this metaphor, Shakespeare suggests Hermia is headstrong. Now, I'm going to pause right here. This is Mr. O'Brien stepping out of the writing. That first paragraph shows who Hermia is. And I've seen a lot of people write really strong paragraphs to show who one character is. But now, here's the difference about what we're doing today. My next paragraph is going to show how her stubbornness makes something happen. So here we go. I'm reading the second paragraph. Hermia's resolution leads her to run away. Lysander has a plan to leave Athens and get married at his aunt's house. He says, "If thou lovest me, then steal forth my father's house tomorrow night, and in the wood, a league without the town, there will I stay for thee." Hermia demonstrates her willfulness again by saying, "By all the vows that ever men have broke, in number more than ever women spoke, in that same place thou hast appointed me, tomorrow truly will I meet with thee." Hermia chooses to go with Lysander and puts herself in a dangerous situation. By running away, Hermia is defying not just her father, but the king, and that could get her killed. She is also leaving the protection of the walls of Athens by going into the woods where dangerous animals or men could be lurking. Hermia's stubborn love for Lysander makes her do dangerous things. So look at that. We've got two paragraphs. In the first paragraph, I am showing who Hermia is. In the second paragraph, I'm showing how who Hermia is makes things happen in the story. Oh, yeah, if it wasn't for her stubbornness, if it wasn't for her resolution, then Hermia probably would not have run away with Lysander. Now, as we're standing here, as we're looking at this, I want to point out something interesting here. When I do citations, I'm doing something a little bit different than we've talked about before. I have the act number, then the scene number, and then the line numbers that I've quoted right there. Normally we put the author's last name and the page number, but in Shakespeare's plays, or actually in any play, we do it a little bit differently. We have that act number, the scene number, and then the line numbers. And then I also want to notice one other thing that I've done here, and that is at the beginning, I mentioned that Hermia is stubborn. Oh, look, I say it right there. But I have to repeat that idea several times throughout this. So rather than repeating that word stubborn, I use synonyms for that word. Oh, look, I've said she's headstrong. I said she has resolution. I also say down here, oh, let's see here. Oh, back down here, I also bring in that idea once again of her being stubborn. Oh, there it is. Her willfulness. I also mentioned that. So rather than repeating who she is throughout, I try and use different words. I also, as I mentioned, I have a very specific way of citing a play. And I have those two paragraphs. The first paragraph to show who she is, and the second paragraph to explain how who she is makes something happen. This is due this evening, so I can't wait to see what you've written. And if you have any questions, please email me at dennis.o'brien@claytonvalley.org. Have a great day.